Portfolio Composer, episode 175.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach, Garrett Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of the Portfolio Composer.
If you invented a cure for cancer tomorrow in your basement and you didn't tell anybody, you can bet that a lot of people would be angry with you if they found out 10 years later that you've been hiding it. I kind of look at this the same way. If you're offering a service to people because you have a particular skill or you do something that they could benefit from, they want to know about it. Now, not everyone on earth, but it's sort of your obligation to share whatever your gift is with the world. And marketing is about telling people about it.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Portfolio Composer. I am your host, your coach, your teacher, Garrett Hope, and I'm so excited for you to join us today for this episode. If you're a composer or a creative of any type, you are taking steps in the right direction by increasing your knowledge of what it means to be a business owner in the 21st century and what it means to be a composer with all of the tools and resources we have available to us. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you get a tremendous amount of value out of this episode and all of the others as well. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you can get these episodes delivered straight to your phone. And consider joining Patreon to become a part of the Portfolio Composer community. This is where I can host monthly group coaching calls and where you can get access to the Marketing for Composers course and some other things as well. But today's guest is an author. His mission in life is to help business owners just like us reach our next level. And he's recently published a book called The Likeability Expert, and I'm very happy to introduce you to Michael Katz. Welcome, Michael.
Great to be here, Garrett. Thanks.
I'm so excited. Michael specializes in helping independent professionals get more and better clients by positioning themselves as likable experts. Since launching Blue Penguin in 2000, Michael has been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and other media. He is the author of 4 books and has published more than 400 issues of the Likeable Expert Gazette, a twice-monthly email newsletter and podcast. Michael has an MBA from Boston University and a BA from McGill University. Michael, one of the things I talk about a lot when I'm helping composers with the marketing side of things is the idea of being known. And there's this saying in the business world, which I know you're familiar with, is like, know, and trust. Can we just start right there? What do those 3 things mean?
Well, I think for people like us, and I'm in the same category, people who are solos who work for themselves, we all live in a word-of-mouth world. And so unlike, Verizon or AT&T or whoever you want to think of, Coca-Cola, that spends a lot of money on advertising and promotion and sponsorships and has a name brand recognition. We don't. So it's very important to figure out, how does word of mouth work and how can I take advantage of it? And it's very much tied to this idea of know, like, and trust, because that's really what is the fuel behind word of mouth.
One of the things that you've been doing, becoming a likable expert, is to increase that first part, right?
You mean the likability part?
The likability aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it might be helpful if I share a little bit of my background,
yeah,
sort of how
do.
I got to this whole thing. So I have a very kind of conventional, business background. Went to school, went to business school, had a few jobs, and then I ended up in a big company. And I was there, my last job, I was there for 12 years. And I was a marketing guy. But when I went off on my own in 2000, I suddenly realized that I had absolutely no idea how to get clients. Because nothing I had learned in school or did in my job had anything to do with the way this whole word of mouth thing works. It was all based on spending money and promotion, and we had budgets and staff and all that kind of stuff. It was even though I was marketing, it wasn't really a creative endeavor. It was a numbers game. And then when I went off on my own, I found I don't have any of the stuff anymore. How do I make it work for me? I'm sure if I asked your listeners, where do your best clients or jobs come from, the answer would be word of mouth. The thing is, most people I find just kind of leave it at that. Like, if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But what I have found is that although word of mouth is random, it's not luck. So you can turn the volume up on it. And the likability piece was another thing that I really never gave any thought to when I had a job. I mean, in a big company, if I even mentioned, we need to be more likable, not only would it not have occurred to me, but I would have been kind of laughed out of the room. We lived in a world where if it didn't fit into a spreadsheet, it didn't exist. And what I found when I went off my own was that you kind of need three things. First, people need to believe you're good at what you do. So that's the whole expert piece. There is a certain amount of, do I believe he or she is good? And we could talk about that too. It's more do I believe it than it is it true, actually. There's do I remember them? So for word of mouth to work, I have to think of you when someone says I have a need for a particular thing. And then the last thing is, do I like you? Which again sounds so kind of soft and not businessy or serious, but we hire people we like. We refer people we like. And so it's important to consider how the things you're doing enhance that, because that's a big part of whether you're going to get more work and the kind of work you want with the kind of people you want.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things we can do to become more likable?
Well, I should say that the good news is you don't have to become more likable with almost, very few exceptions. So I'm not talking about, there's Joe in accounting who's really capable, but everybody hates him. Go work with him to make him a better person. That's not my department. My whole approach is the vast majority of people are already likable and authentic and nice, and you meet them and, they hold the door open for you if you're walking in somewhere, and, if you met them in Starbucks, they're friendly and all that. The problem is when we start doing marketing, we forget all that. In fact, we deliberately put that aside because we're often afraid it's going to make us not look serious. And so it's not that you have to become more likable. It's really more about, can you do the things in the business world that you probably do every day in real life? And I find that I spend most of my time not teaching clients to be more likable, but helping them remove this sort of false facade. I mean, it depends on the occupation you're in. But certainly people who are in a really serious, financial planning kind of business, for example, they're very inclined to not show any personal side to themselves. And so what I'm trying to do is help them do things that just really reveal more of the authentic person they are, because I think that's a bigger factor in getting hired than your actual capability. And not to say you don't have to be capable. The problem is everyone you compete with is also capable, at least the people who are worth worrying about. And so, again, depending on what you do for a living, it's really hard often for the people who are going to hire you to know, are you actually better than the other person technically? Like, you don't have any idea how medically capable your own doctor is. I mean, hopefully she's good, but, as I like to say, half the doctors in America finished in the bottom half of their class in medical school. So there's a good chance yours is one of them. But if you like her, it's not because of her medical skills. It's because the way she talks to you or the way she interacts or just what you think of her. And I find that spans all kinds of professions. So I only work with people who sell a service, financial planners, consultants, coaches, writers. And they also are people who tend not to be really business people. So, your listeners I know are, artists and writers. And so they may think, well, I'm not really a business person. But the truth is, the typical financial planner or doctor or consultant also doesn't think of themselves that way. They have a particular skill and they need to get clients, but they're almost never in the business of marketing and don't know a lot about it. So they're kind of very similar to your listeners in terms of how do I take this thing I'm really good at and sell more of it, and also to people I want to work with? And so that's a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Michael, that we're in the same camp as all those people. Doctors, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, unless that doctor works for a hospital and is an employee of a hospital, they are all small business owners with a tremendous amount of regulation and tax burden that they have to deal with. At least us as content creators, we're free of a lot of that. But we face the same problems of how do we find clients and how do we get our art, our music in front of those people, and we sell a service.
Right. In fact, I'd also add that the more certifications that are required to be in business, the harder it is to differentiate yourself. So people like us, because I'm a marketing guy, anyone could say they're a marketing guy. I don't have to be certified in any way. But if you're a financial planner or certainly a doctor or an accountant, it may at first seem like, well, you have to get certified, or you're an attorney, you have to pass the bar, so that's good because people know you're good. The problem is, now by definition, everyone you're competing with has the same certification.
Yeah.
So it's even harder to separate yourself, at least in the case of your listeners. Since anyone can claim it, there's more kind of running room because you don't have to be certified. So it's a good thing that doesn't exist. Because, yes, I've got clients in industries like that where not only is it hard to differentiate themselves, they've got all kinds of regulations about what they can say and do. And, they have to include that 5-paragraph thing at the bottom of all their emails, by law, which kind of hurts certainly the likability piece because it makes everything feel kind of stiff and unfriendly.
Yeah, it does. I want to start asking you some specific things from the book. I enjoyed this read very much, and like I told you before we hit record, I annotated all over the place, which is something I'm prone to do. But a few things really jumped out to me, and one of them, and to set the premise for the listeners, this new book of Michael's, The Likeability Expert, is really in book form a publication of emails and blog posts that Michael has done recently. And so they're very conversational, but applicable. And here's something that jumped out to me. You say, somewhere along the way, I switched from thinking of marketing as promoting to helping. And I wanted to ask you to elaborate on that a little bit, because a lot of people believe that marketing is about shoving your stuff at somebody. The word you used would be promoting. How is marketing helping?
Well, I think, and by the way, that's sort of very common, that marketing is somehow tricking people, and sales is flat out cheating them. Yep. And that's commonly held, again, by all kinds of people who don't do that for a living. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that kind of needs unpacking, and I think part of it is a very human assumption that somehow I'm not worthy enough to charge money for what I do. And again, I've seen it across people with incredible range of industries, experience, expertise. So it just kind of seems to be universally true for most people. So this idea that if I'm trying to tell you about a thing I have and asking for money in return, that the only way I can do that is to somehow trick you. And so I always think of it this way. If you invented a cure for cancer tomorrow in your basement and you didn't tell anybody, you can bet that a lot of people would be angry with you if they found out 10 years later that you've been hiding it. I kind of look at this the same way. If you're offering a service to people because you have a particular skill or you do something that they could benefit from, they want to know about it. Now, not everyone on earth, but it's sort of your obligation to share whatever your gift is with the world. And marketing is about telling people about it. So just like if you had a friend who sold something that was terrific and you loved it, you'd want to know about it. I try to think of my potential clients the same way. I'm not tricking them. I'm not selling this to people who don't need it. But unless I share information about it, which is essentially what marketing is, letting them know who I am and what I do and all that, then they're not going to find out. So you're actually kind of robbing them of having that. But again, all that said, there's a lot going on that I think prevents us from being kind of confident enough to do that. So marketing is definitely a kind of a learned skill. It's awkward for a lot of people in the beginning.
Yes, it is. What are some of those things that are going on that prevent us from moving forward as marketers?
Well, again, I think it's two things. It's this: who am I to sell my services? And I also think there's confusion. Like, so, well, okay, I know I'm supposed to market, but so what do I do on Monday when I get to my office or, wake up or whatever? So it's not necessarily something you would know how to do if you'd never done it. I don't think it's necessarily that complicated. In fact, I think the best marketing for people like us has got to be simple. I'm very focused on staying in front of the people you know over and over again. So people you know, meaning who are your current connections, and then what can you do to be visible in front of them, and also in a way that sort of demonstrates who you are and what you know. So creating content, offering free samples of stuff, just being in touch with all the people on earth that you know. So I always like to ask people, hey, what do you do to stay in touch with the people you know? And the answer is usually nothing. Mm-hmm. So, we meet people, we went to college with people, we, meet people at events. Even if you have a great connection with people, most people are not very proactive about staying in touch with them. I'm big on the idea that, look, the average, middle-aged human knows, 300 or 400 people. Some people know way more, way less. But when I work with people and I say, okay, give me a list of everyone you know. And by know, I mean, if you called them up or emailed them, you wouldn't have to introduce yourself. So if you can keep those relationships alive, not selling to them, just connecting with them on a regular basis, that's where all the word of mouth comes from. People remember you and say, oh, yeah, I know a guy, you should call him up. What's interesting to me is most people don't do anything to make that happen. And also, people tend to think of marketing or networking or whatever you want to call it as things you do with people who are in a position to hire you. The thing is, we know way more people who are never going to hire us and never could than people who could hire us. Because, again, all these connections we have, people live across the street, people you went to college with, your attorney, your auto mechanic. You know all these people. All those people know people who, if they were in touch with you, could send them your way. So I'm very focused on how can you just create this little machine of relationship building and rejuvenating. And the result is it tends to be very random, but it causes people to come your way. I mean, I really don't do anything to reach out to people I don't know in terms of my business. I'm just constantly staying in touch with people, trying to connect on a regular basis. And what happens is people say, oh, it's funny you should call. I was talking to a guy who needs whatever. And so it's random, but you can turn the volume up on it by doing stuff like that.
I like your metaphor of turning the volume up. As a musician, I know that feeling very well, inside and out.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot going on in the background that we can't see, and that's again, when I worked in a big company, the concept of relationship building would have been a hard sell because we're very much focused on cause and effect. We could. I hate to admit it, but I used to work for the cable company, so we used to mail people stuff every month, and we could tell the second the mail had hit because the phones would start ringing, and then 4 or 5 days later they'd stop ringing, and we'd send more mail the next month. So it was very much we sent this many pieces of mail, and this many people bought HBO or whatever. Mm-hmm. Relationship marketing doesn't work that way. It's kind of happening in the background. Right now, somebody's sitting there in a coffee shop saying to a friend, boy, I need someone who could do this. And what you want is when that's said, the other person says, I know somebody who could do that for you. So it's very just kind of out there. There's a certain leap of faith that building relationships and all of that is going to lead to this. But I've had, my entire business for 18 years is based on somebody I've never heard of calling me saying, hey, this guy told me about you. So I spent a lot of time meeting and staying in touch with enough of this guys so people come my way.
And so it starts with a relationship, and then you have to follow up with the relationship. Staying in front of them is the term you used, so that you're top of mind, essentially.
Yeah, I think actually it starts with people. You need to, and again, I know your listeners do a variety of things, but it's important that the world at large understands what it is you do. Mm-hmm. And depending on your profession, it's more or less obvious. I mean, everybody sort of knows what an attorney does. Whereas, I've had clients who are like, chemical engineers or something where, nobody knows what they do. But it's really important that you occupy some type of niche. In fact, the narrower, the better.
100% agree.
Because
yep.
You want to be the solution that pops into someone's head in that coffee shop when their friend says, I'm looking for this. And so I had a guy who was in one of my courses who owned a music store. And they did all kinds of lessons, like every music store, and he probably had 500 students and all that. And he told me that the reason he was successful was because he focused all of his attention on like preschoolers and maybe like kindergartners. And he would go into the local kindergarten like every month. He'd be going to like 10 of them, and he'd bring in a saxophone, and they had stuff like that. And his whole approach was, I need them to see me, the parents, as someone who's friendly to their kids when they're little, because then they're with me, straight through high school.
Right.
But so he had this really narrow approach. He had nothing against teaching adults, but his whole marketing focus was, I want to be known as the kindergarten music instructor. So that's important, that you're narrow enough that people associate you with something in particular. And then, yes, the second thing is, do you just connect with people on a regular basis so that there's enough of that word of mouth stuff? I mean, I should also say that I'm very focused on trying to make connections with people as opposed to get clients. So it's really about relationship building, because the client stuff just sort of naturally falls out of that if people understand what you do for a living. Like, you don't have to do anything extraordinary. You don't have to go have coffee with someone and figure out how can I close them or something like that. It's really about, can people be connected with you? And I find the best clients come from people who've known you for years. I mean, someone just hired me yesterday who came from someone I worked with like 2 years ago who knew somebody else I worked with. So there's no way I could have mapped out the path to the person who called me yesterday. I didn't even know she was alive. But it's only because I did work with other people and then stayed in touch with them that somehow, the stars align and people call you.
And to take this back to what you said a few minutes ago, it's nearly impossible to measure an ROI on that kind of network building.
Right.
As opposed to the ROI on doing the direct mail campaign that you did for the cable company. But you have to invest in it.
Yeah, I often use the metaphor of exercise.
Okay.
Like, if you said, hey, it's my high school reunion this weekend and I need to lose 30 pounds, what do? I'd be like, cut your arm off. That's about your only option. There's nothing you could do in that short a period of time. But if it was 6 months away, now you have a decent shot, because we all know the answer is, eat better and exercise. But it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, exercise is a perfect example of a thing where there's just a leap of faith here. I mean, there's enough science behind it now that we kind of know it works. But the idea that you're like going to the gym and sweating in the hope that 6 months from now you'll be in better shape, it doesn't really make logical sense. It's just that it's sort of well documented enough. But there's a certain randomness to it. And I think it's the same thing here. It's not going to happen immediately, but if you just do it regularly, it just leads to good things. And I've got, example after example of my own and other people I've worked with where it really makes a difference. And it really does come back to this likability thing, that there's so many things you can do to connect with people that is not about selling them, but it is about helping them or just interacting with them. And I think the advantage that we have if we do that is that so many people are so preoccupied with selling people today that they don't take time to do any of this stuff, and they never will, which, again, I like that. Like, this is never going to be a crowded approach to business building because it's not trackable enough and it doesn't happen fast enough. So a lot of people aren't going to bother with it.
It's a good point. This is one way you can stand out.
Yeah, and it's also kind of nicer. I mean,
yeah.
I have to say, all of this I just sort of, kind of stumbled upon because, again, it had nothing to do with what I had learned about marketing. I just found once I went off to work on my own, I don't know, I like having coffee with people, and I like sharing information, so I've been publishing a newsletter for a long time. But then what I found was, this stuff is actually leading to business, so now I do it deliberately. But it was really just a random thing I kind of stumbled upon.
I'm curious, Michael, about some of the things you've done to build your business, because as a solo business owner, it's very similar to what we do as composers. And you talk about going out on your own. So you made a decision to leave a job to start a business. But I imagine there have been parts of that journey that were hard, where you wanted to throw in the towel. How did you battle those slumps? This is what Seth Godin calls the dip.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. And I should say that it's an illusion to think that there's some point you'll reach where you've kind of arrived and you no longer have that battle. Like, in my experience, it's dip after dip after dip. You just have bigger things that you worry about, but it doesn't matter. There's still this, your biggest problem of the day is your biggest problem of the day to you. So when I first left my job, I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a year. Let's see what happens. At the end of the year, business hadn't really taken off, but, I hadn't missed any mortgage payments, so I thought, okay, we'll give it another year. Same thing. It was like, yeah, it's kind of going okay. By the third year, what I realized was that I had created this expectation that I was somehow going to, and I always use the expression, I was going to turn the corner where I now was successful. And what I found, I've been doing this now 18 years, that, okay, I'm still doing okay, but I can't take my eye off the ball for a month. And there's definitely times where I don't know, now my problem is, should I keep doing the same thing now or change it? So again, you always have things you're battling. I think the way I think of it now is I have just as many problems. I just don't really worry about them anymore because I have enough history to know, I always kind of figure it out. In the beginning, you're not so sure about that. But it's a bumpy road, but the nice thing is you have real problems. Like I found when I worked in a company, most of my problems weren't real. And what I mean is most of my mental energy was spent on things like, did my boss just kind of look at me funny? Or is that other person going to move ahead of me in the company in some way? So it was all this posturing and stuff like that. Here, okay, I have problems, but they're real. Is this person going to hire me? Can I pay, my mortgage? But I find that's a much sort of better way to live. It's like you're actually in a real game as opposed to, worrying all the time.
It's almost like that Buddhist saying that life is suffering. Well, business owning is going through dips, I guess.
Yeah, and I have to say, I look at my life as in two parts. There was up until I left my job, and ever since I have, and it was the best thing I ever did. Even though, again, here's the other way I look at it. When you have a job, everything potentially is terrible. Not that it necessarily is, but, you have a commute, and maybe you don't like your boss, and, the work you're doing, you have to do whatever they give you and all that. The good thing about it, though, is they pay you every couple of weeks. When you work for yourself, it's the exact opposite. You can do anything you want with anyone you want. You get to call the shots. The problem is nobody pays you anymore. So given those two options, I'll take the second one every time. I mean, one thing I know for sure, there's no way I'm going to look back on my life and think, I really should have given it a shot. And I think that's what you hear from people when they talk about regrets. It's like, gee, I can't believe I'm still in this job and now it's too late. And so for anyone who's working on their own, in many ways, you're already successful because you're doing that.
But it's scary. That's the thing. And you say here, actually, in your book, this is a good time for me to bring this up. There's some my mark in the margins was, this is a scary place to live, because when you have a job, and you just said this, you have the promise of a paycheck if you do the work. And you don't have that necessarily as a business owner. And this is what you said. If nobody ever walks away from you on the basis of price, you're probably not charging enough. And that's that scary place to live, because we want the guarantee of making sure we're making money, so we can often we can undervalue ourselves on the marketplace instead of being brave enough to say, I know that I need to charge this, not just for my own financial well-being, but because this is the value I can provide for you. How did you make that mindset switch, Michael, from the safety side to the I'm ready to live in that uncertainty?
Yeah. You mean in terms of actually leaving my job or raising prices?
Both. Because business ownership is risky, because there's no promises.
Well, leaving my job, I have to say, I still can't remember whatever gave me this kind of willingness to do that. Because, I mean, at the time, I had 3 kids under the age of 8.
Oh, man.
And I had a good job. I mean, and where I worked, as much as the cable company can be bad for customers, it was actually a very nice place to work. It wasn't like it was oppressive in any way, and I was okay. But I remember the exact moment I decided to leave my job. It was my 10-year anniversary. I was there 12 years. It's my 10-year anniversary, and I was at some kind of company offsite. And my boss brought me up to congratulate me in front of everybody. And she was actually new to the company, so she didn't really know me. And she was just kind of reading off a thing. And she said she wanted to congratulate Michael on his 20 years with the company when I was only there 10, and nobody even noticed. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be here another 10 years, and it's going to be exactly the same thing. So it was comfortable, but, at some point, comfortable becomes painful. Yeah. And the truth is, there's plenty of people, I'm 57, there's plenty of people I know now who if you get laid off at 57, good luck. I think there's actually, in many ways, more risk. Working at a company is like having one client.
Yes.
So in this way, if I don't get that client, if I offer a fee and it's too expensive or something, all right, well, that's too bad. But I love the fact that no one company or person can sort of pull the rug out from under me. I could lose a client tomorrow, but so what? I've got plenty of others. So there's a certain security in that you don't have when you have a job.
Yep. What's one thing that you wish the people you worked with, these service-based providers, what's one thing that you wish that they understood, that you feel like you're constantly reiterating to them?
I think it's that everyone else is faking it too. So there's a tendency, again, it depends, typically, or particularly if you haven't done this for a long time, but even then, there's this tendency to assume everyone you see, especially the people who kind of look successful, are just kind of coasting through life and never have any doubts, and they get all the money they want. And I think it's very much an illusion. I find that I'll often get to know someone who maybe I previously thought had it all figured out, and once you get to know them a little better, you realize, they're as confused and worried as you are. So I like to tell people that just because I've been doing this for a long time, it doesn't mean that in any way that I've sort of no longer worry about stuff. It depends on the day, on how things are going. It's just, again, it's almost like I don't worry about worrying. I know I'm going to worry about stuff, but I'm like, all right, I also know that the phone might ring 5 minutes later and now some great thing happened. I have to say, when I had a job, the difference between a great day and a terrible day, it was a very narrow band. It was like if you stumbled upon leftover birthday cake in the lunchroom, that was a great day. Now, you can go from the best day to the worst in like a couple of hours. So it's like you're in the game. And a lot of people don't have the nerve to do that. So for anyone who's working on their own, I encourage that. I'm always encouraging my own kids, don't get a job. Do something you really want to do.
What kind of pushback do your kids give you then when you say that?
Well, it's kind of funny because I don't know if it sort of skips every generation. My dad worked for the same company in the same building his entire career. But in his era, that was how you got ahead. And when I left my comfortable job to go do this, my parents thought I was out of my mind. Like, what are you doing? So with my kids, my kids grew up with me not going to work and kind of being around and like not really clear what it is I did. So I think they've had some good exposure to that. And that's all I really want for my kids anyway, is to do something they really want to do and not, wake up when they're 40 and say, what have I been doing for the last several years? So again, I kind of joke about the job thing. It doesn't mean you can't have a job that's really good and you like. I just don't want them to do stuff for its own sake. I want them to, do what they like.
Yeah. Well, I want nothing less for my daughter. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So, listeners, I want to let you know that I am going to give to someone on the Portfolio Composer mailing list a copy, a Kindle version of The Likeable Expert by Michael Katz. So if you are interested in potentially getting this, make sure that you've joined the newsletter. But Michael also has a resource for you. So Michael, tell us about that.
Yeah, I have a special page actually set up for your listeners, and it's at michaelkatz.com/portfolio. And there you can download the first 15 of the 121 insights of my book. You can also sign up for my newsletter where you'll get a bunch of ongoing information about being a successful solo and some other stuff. So it's all right there for anybody who wants it.
And trust me, folks, this is a great resource. You'll get a lot out of it. And so, Michael, thank you for that. Let's take a quick break right now, and we'll come back for the lightning round. I'm very excited to announce that the Portfolio Composer has become a strategic partner with the American Composers Forum. What this means is that we are working together to build our composition community. If you have not heard of the American Composers Forum, you can find more at composersforum.org, but it is the largest composer-oriented organization in the United States that has many resources, programs, and grant opportunities designed to help you build your career and to create your art. The biggest benefit I have gotten out of being an ACF member is the curated composer opportunity list. This might be the most extensive list that you can find anywhere, with opportunities for calls for scores, grants, and performance opportunities. So I highly recommend joining this organization. Again, you can learn more at composersforum.org. And I also want to invite you to join the Portfolio Composer community by becoming a Patreon sponsor. By joining the community, you will have access to private webinars that I do for the Patreon communities and students of my course, and as well as private coachings, one-on-one sessions, and a few other bonuses. So please go to patreon.com/portfolio composer.
Welcome to the lightning round.
If you could go back in time, Michael, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Definitely buy Bitcoin. But besides that, I would say do what you really want to do. I mean, again, in some ways it sounds kind of cliche, but I feel like I spent certainly 20 years just kind of following the path that was in front of me. And it was only when I got to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm not sure this is what I really want to keep doing, that I left. But if I were going to do it again, I think right from the beginning, I would have tried to really figure out what am I good at and what do I like to do and who might want to buy that and focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. What is a personal habit of yours that you feel leads to your success?
I keep showing up. So I'm really good at over and over and over again. I've been publishing a newsletter for 18 years, every other week. I'm very good at once a week I try and meet someone for lunch or coffee. I stay in touch with people with email and phone calls. So I'm very good at this sort of slow and steady wins the race. I just kind of keep doing it over and over again. And I find that works really well for this particular approach, which is this building relationship approach.
Yeah. A slow, controlled burn is better than a flash in the pan, right?
I mean, again, the other might work as well, but I'm just the in many ways, I was very sort of psychologically relieved to see that you could have a successful business without being some kind of fast-talking salesperson, which I kind of thought I was going to have to become in some way once I went off on my own. Mm-hmm. And I think that's certainly a reasonable approach, to be someone who could cold call and, convince people of stuff and all that. That's not me. I just kind of slowly take my time, and I find that works too, and it's much more suited to my personality because even though I'm a marketing guy, I'm really a writer at heart. I mean, that's my main skill, frankly. And so, like many of your listeners, I'm introverted in the sense that I like the definition that says introverts recharge on their own and extroverts recharge with other people. Like my youngest son, he can't go more than like a couple of hours without having to be around people. He's very social. In my case, when people come over for the holidays to the house, I'm good for like 2 hours, and I got to go hide in another room.
I hear you. Yep.
So I like that you can have that approach, thanks to very much the internet and all of that you couldn't have done even 20 years ago. Now, between writing and podcasts and video and all that, you can kind of sit in your office and get a lot done. You don't have to be out there all the time. So I find that works really well for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Michael, do you play an instrument at all?
I played the drums in high school, and I'm now trying to learn the guitar because two of my sons sing and play the guitar, and I don't sing, but there's guitars all over, and I thought, you know what? This is something I should do now while I have the chance. So I'm working on it. I've got the opening to Sweet Home Alabama going.
Well, there you go. With just those 3 chords, you can rule the world, right? 3 chords and the truth. Man, that's a fun song to play, too.
It's not fun to listen to over and over again, I've been told.
Well, yes.
Well,
Especially their live version that's like 9 minutes long.
Right.
This next question can often be a challenge for people because I'm asking you to name a piece out of many that could be meaningful for you. But I'm looking for those pieces of music that changed your life. Personally, as a composer and a lover of sound, I can name pieces that had these moments for me where time stood still, and I'm sure you did too. Can you name a piece that has that deep emotional connection for you?
Not exactly, but I think I could kind of touch on that question a different way. Like I don't really know enough about music to have that connection that most of your listeners do, but a lot of what I talk about in helping people with this idea of likability and authenticity relates to storytelling. So I'm often coaching people on this idea of, in your writing and even you're speaking to potential clients, to tell stories from your experience. Stories are very compelling and people connect with them and all that. And one thing I've always noticed about musicians who I connect with are people like a Jackson Browne or James Taylor, who you kind of feel like they're like, how did they figure out exactly what just happened to you? Like they have this way of writing that makes you feel like they either lived your life or they're talking to you. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like that's part of, to me, what's so compelling. I mean, I have to say, I'm much more connected to lyrics than music. I don't know a lot about music, and I'm more of a word guy. And so I don't know if there's a particular piece, but I would definitely say that, Jackson Browne has been my, particularly his early stuff, person that I've always thought, I love the stuff he writes.
Lyrics are as much a part of the music as the notes themselves, especially when we're talking about songs. So name one Jackson Browne song that really stands out for you.
It's the one about, now I have to remember In the Shape of a Heart, which about sort of a lost relationship. And I don't remember the first time I heard it, but I do remember listening to it over and over again. He probably wrote it in the early 70s, and I'm sure I didn't discover it until 10 or 15 years later. But there too, I like the idea that I could come across something he wrote 15 years later and feels like it still relates to me today.
Yeah, it's a mark of a good piece of music.
Right.
I think books are often the most untapped resource we have available to us. And I'm going to list your book on the show notes page as a resource. But could you list 1 or 2 other books that you think the listeners should read?
Yeah, in fact, the other thing on that page I mentioned, one of the things that I'll send to people if they're interested is a list of 11 books that I recommend. And I call them business books, but at least half of them are not really business in particular. Mm-hmm. So one book I'd highly recommend, it's from a guy named Seth Godin, Godin, who's really well known as a marketing guy. And he's got a number of books, but there's one called Purple Cow. And in it, he's talking about this whole idea of standing out and being different. You know, the idea that if you saw a purple cow, you'd take notice. It's a very short book, but he's just a terrific writer and just a very insightful guy. Another one, also not a business book in particular, is called Made to Stick by these two brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, like Heath bars. And they talk about why do certain ideas stick in your head and others do not. And although it's not about marketing in particular, it relates, because why do certain people and concepts and phrases, and they talk a lot about what makes something more memorable than something else. So those are definitely two books that I find I'm recommending over and over again.
So listeners, two resources for you. First, if you join the Portfolio Composer newsletter, you stand a chance of getting a free copy of The Likeable Expert by Michael Katz. And Michael has created a resource for you as well to get these lists of books and other resources on how to become more likable. And you can find that at michaelkatz.com/portfolio. Michael, before we go, I would love to give you the floor one more time if you have any final words of wisdom or pieces of advice you'd like to share.
I would just reiterate the idea that you just got to keep showing up. And that, again, I think if you're working on your own, doing what you like to do, you're already successful. The rest is just details.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for putting your work out into the world. It's impacted me already, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. I appreciate being on.